Well, as we've been telling you this morning, the Prime Minister has announced that Britain will be taking 20,000 Afghan refugees over the next few years as Afghanistan is left to the mercy of the barbarism of the Taliban. In this new scheme being set up by the Home Secretary, 5,000 refugees will be resettled over the next year at a cost to the taxpayer of £200 million, the Prime Minister says, with the rest being resettled over the next few years. Now, I'm in favour of offering people in desperate need refuge in this country, but only and only if everything can be done to make sure that British people will not be put at risk, that those who might want to do us harm don't take advantage of the new route to smuggle in dodgy ideologies or, even worse, literal terrorists. And do I trust that the screening processes that need to be in place will be in place? That I can't be sure of, but I am sure of this. With immigrants and refugees being so high up on the government's list of priorities right now, it's time to have a proper integration policy. There's currently no single UK-wide policy on integration. Government departments and local authorities are left to do their own thing with fluffy initiatives on community cohesion, diversity and inclusion. Now, migration into the UK runs at hundreds of thousands a year. We're letting people from all over the world, and with the idea of post-Brexit global Britain being pushed, we could see the numbers from the EU continue to rise. That's very likely. I don't think it's unfair that people who come to this country should be expected to commit to learning the English language. I don't think it's unfair to expect that people coming into this country integrate into our ways of life, respect and adopt the values we hold dear as a nation. I don't want to see communities of immigrants living in closed-off communities excluded from the rest of us. I don't want to see so-called no-go areas. I don't want to see dodgy attitudes towards women being imported and left to thrive because we're too scared to call them out. I'm not saying immigrants should be held at gunpoint and forced to recite every word of Rule Britannia or have a Union Jack forcibly draped around their neck at all times. I'm just saying we seem to be so keen on opening our borders, while then we should be equally as keen on making sure that those coming here integrate. Yes, I don't think we have we don't have a proper integration policy. And what then ends up happening is you do get these, people come here often. There are people in this country who've lived here for decades and still have very little grasp of the English language. I think that's actually unacceptable. And it's partly also unacceptable because that really restricts them economically. They can't contribute to British society. They can't contribute to the economy. This is actually a policy. Properly resourcing this would benefit those people massively as well, more so than anything.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I used to do a bit of community work when I was at school, and I went to school in a place called Burnage, or Bernage, if you wanted to make it sound posher. And there was a place there called the Curry Mile, which is, I think, just what it says on the tin. And a lot of the local schools there, had clearly a high proportion of relatively recent immigration. And what I was always staggered by was that those children, a lot of them anyway, certainly not all, but a lot of them who've been born here, raised here, actually had very, very low reading ages. Their grasp of the English language was not particularly great, and it was purely because they obviously lived in communities where they'd kind of continued to speak their mother tongue. Now, look, I can perfectly understand why that would be the case. I do think, though, that we shouldn't be afraid of saying, look, who's that benefiting? It's not benefiting the child, is it? They still have to go through our state education system. They still have to go and work in the English society. It's in everyone's interest, really, I think, to push through a bit more integration.
I mean, it's no surprise that the communities with the lowest levels of particularly female employment, which tends to be sort of Bangladeshi and Pakistani communities, and the Somali community as well, the employment rates for women are absolutely dire in those communities. There's cultural elements there. There's expectations of women there. They're expected to just sort of rear the children and not integrate into wider society. I don't think that's acceptable. So I think we should be a little bit bolder and say, look, we will be generous, we will let in people, we will take in refugees, but we're also going to say, look, we do expect you to learn English, we do expect you to try and integrate, and we also need to properly fund that policy as well. I think that there'd be a lot of benefits.